Been telling you for weeks that as The Mandalorian and Grogu was set to release, and all of these types of different, articles coming out, different things. We saw the stuff from Deadline initially talking about a $165 million budget, and then it was net budget. And then, of course, we found out that the $165 million figure was a gross cost. There was a $21 million film tax credit from the state of California. So then people started saying, oh, that brought it down to 144. Yeah, those were qualified expenses, though, right? Qualified expenses, meaning the things that Disney could actually claim the film tax credit on. What they can't claim the credit on is the non-qualified expenses that were not included in the $165 million, which is to say they could not claim film tax credits on all of the massive costs of hiring people like Pedro Pascal, Sigourney Weaver, Jon Favreau, that guy. When we look at right now, and you've got another movie coming out later this year called Avengers Doomsday, and then a follow-up to it called Secret Wars. And you're telling me that you gave the Russo brothers $100 million to write and direct Secret Wars and Doomsday? $100 million for those two movies, reportedly. You might want to think that a guy like Jon Favreau on the first Star Wars movie in 7 years is probably making 10, 15, maybe 20 million on something like that. Not included in that 165. Like I said, neither was Pedro Pascal's salary. I'm not making it up. We did a video on it. Go back and watch it. Forbes magazine, I believe, even covered that. In fact, we got a new article today from Forbes magazine talking about some of this. And we're going to walk through the box office here. But again, we always have to put it through the lens of financial reality here on this show, because that is what we do. Mando and Grogu currently sits at 144.9. Let's call it $145 million. Again, these are estimated figures. These figures will kind of clean up by Monday or Tuesday, probably by Tuesday, since we have Memorial Day here in the States tomorrow. So box offices, when you have a holiday Monday, the reporting usually kind of stretches out an extra 24 hours. We'll just have to see where that goes. They're still hoping that this gets to, they pick up basically, the estimate is now that they might be able to pick up another 15 to 20 million on Monday, or maybe around 20 million. Here's the reality. It kind of doesn't matter. This movie needs to get to roughly $600 million to break even. This is the first Star Wars film that has been put out in 7 years. And yeah, a lot of people want to argue that figure, and that's all cute and dandy, but wouldn't you know it, a week after I said that, 2 weeks maybe after I said that, when I told you this movie was going to need, guess what? The Walt Disney Company themselves confirmed this to the Hollywood Reporter. Go cry somewhere else. The film wasn't expensive by Star Wars standards, says the article in THR, one of the three major Hollywood trades of record. It has the lowest production budget of any previous title made since Disney acquired Lucasfilm. But nor was it cheap. $165 million before a global ad campaign of at least $100 million. Oh, wait a minute. Who told you that the ad campaign for this was probably a decent bit north of $100 million? This guy right here told you it's going to wind up shaking out to be at least around $130 million, and I'm sticking with that number. And again, I have a feeling that Deadline will probably pull that number when they do their annual box office winners and losers. They do it every year around January, February. So we'll have to wait a few months, but they usually come up with a pretty darn good estimated marketing spend, right? Those close to Disney's decision-making, meaning these are people at Disney, confirm that the Jon Favreau film needs to make 500 to 600 million globally to land in the black. Now, let me explain this to you. If this movie was going to break even closer to the low end of that scale, Disney would have simply said, it needs about 500, a little more than $500 million. Now, They said 5 to 600 million. You bet your ass it's closer to the 600 part. And that's what makes sense. If we want to go with the 165 million net cost of production, okay. If you want to tell me that Pedro Pascal and Sigourney Weaver and the entire cast that performed in front of the camera and all the voice actors and Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni and all blah, 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 blah. If you want to tell me all those people cost less than $20 million, you go right ahead. I'm going to have a different thought. But be that as it may, the reality is what's right here. This is the Hollywood Reporter reporting that people close to decision-making, because they can never spill the beans of who their source is in cases like this, obviously. You have things like non-disclosure agreements. In black and white, Disney is confirming the close to $600 million figure that I told you this movie was going to need a few weeks ago. The debate's over. That's it. Simple. Done. Out the door. Now, what does that mean based on where we are currently? Let's go back over here. The Mandalorian and Grogu currently stands at $145 million. Let's say it gets to $165 million by the end of tomorrow. Of course, adding in the extra long weekend, holiday day, Memorial Day on the domestic side. The international box office, not doing great. And we covered some of that earlier in the week. The performances from places like Italy, France, Germany, the UK was below even what Solo was. And, of course, that doesn't even adjust for inflation, which, of course, is problematic beyond belief. So, if we are to presume we are where we are, and we now are beyond any shadow of debate on where this movie needs to go to make its break-even point close to $600 million, which is why I said this movie needs to get to $600 million to be profitable. It does. And now we know it, irrefutably. How many of y'all think in the audience, after our opening weekend, discounting Monday for a second at $145 million, that this movie, this movie needs to leg out to 4x? 4. It needs to go 4 times its opening weekend right here in order to get to what Disney said. Disney said it needs to get to. 4. Or slightly less than 4, if you want to be technical. But still, high 3s. How many movies do that? Not many. Very, 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 very few. And especially big blockbuster movies that are tied to major IPs that are known quantities. Going back for a second, let me make the point of showing the opposite. Obsession. An unknown movie with no big IP backing that nobody saw coming, basically nobody, okay, might actually wind up doing 4, 5, 6x. But it also only opened with 17 million, not 100 million on a 4-day domestic. 165 million, let's call it, maybe. We'll find out by Tuesday on a global opening for Mando and Grogu. This is the difference. By the way, let's look at the movie that everybody's comparing this to. Let's go back to Solo, kids. Let's talk about Solo. Here's the problem. This was 2018. This was 2018. 393 million. Solo opened with 103 million. Mandalorian and Grogu is, as of right now, supposed to be opening with less than that. Less. There might be a little bit of a surprise because the numbers are still fairly close. Let me show you. That's the old one. Sorry. Here we go. So this was written early this morning, and I'm sure, and I'm kind of surprised we haven't had an update midday from this, and we might get one tomorrow morning. We might get one later tonight from Dahal Assange, where we might see an update on this during the show. Matter of fact, here, let me just do this. Let me just refresh this puppy. No, it's the same one. Okay. 97 to 98 million. 4 days. So as of early this morning, Deadline magazine is telling us that the first Star Wars movie in 7 years is not even going to have a $100 million 4-day weekend. That's not good. These are not generally the type of movies that tend to leg out extremely well. I'm not saying that it can't, and I'm not saying that it absolutely won't. But what I am telling you is that historical data is pretty damn clear on these things. It would have to buck a lot of historical trends to do it. Again, it's not impossible, but the chances and the probability of it seems pretty low. And especially when you have a lot of very mixed audience reactions to this thing, and they are mixed. I don't give a damn what the score is on Rotten Tomatoes, the audience scores. It's really, for a movie like this that has such a rabid fan base, and this is not every movie, right? But when you have an IP like Star Wars or modern Disney Marvel stuff, when you have such a rabid fan base, the ones that will front load the box office on a Thursday night and Friday and all this kind of stuff, go back to see it on Saturday and Sunday, which I think is a lot of what's going on right now. They're also going to front load reviews for this. Most people, generally speaking, on stuff like, they're either going to go see it or they're not. It's Star Wars. Everybody knows what it is, right? Everybody knows what Star Wars is. You don't have to explain Star Wars to anybody. This is just something that didn't interest people. Let's go back to Solo. $393 million, a $103 million box office opening domestically over the 4-day Memorial Weekend in 2018. There's a problem with this, and I think you guys already know where I'm going with it. Okay? I just did a quick search. I said, give me the ranges. In 2018, an average ticket price for a 2D movie clocked in, real world, around $11.31. And today it's $16. So when I tell you that if you put some real ticket price inflation on movies like Solo, that $103 million opening in 2018 is the equivalent of about $140 plus million today. And Mando and Grogu is hoping to get to 100. This is why the last video that we had last night is Mando and Grogu is clocking roughly, about a 40% difference in audience, 30 to 40% lower audience than Solo, just based on the inflation. Solo, we talked about, what does Mando and Grogu need to do? It needs to leg out 4x. It needs to make 4 times from this weekend, 160 million. It's got to make that 3 more. It's got to make another 160 and another 160 and another 160 to cover the costs that Disney spent to make and market this film, because theaters keep about half. What was the legs on Solo from opening weekend? 2.53. You better expect that this is pretty much what Mando is going to wind up looking like. Very, very similar. The numbers that we have right now for Mando, which excludes Memorial Day Monday, this is what you base, this is how the legs will be calculated. It will be calculated based on that $81.9 million domestic box office, and then presuming that the international box office will have a relatively similar leg out to suit with the domestic from where it started. It's got to go 4x from this to get us to close to 600 million. That's a little scary. Okay, but Valiant, what about Solo's a bad example. Let's do a really, really popular one. Let's do a big one. Let's do when I say popular, box office, right? Let's do Rise of... Well, let's not do Rise of Palpatine. Let's do Force Awakens. Legs, 3.78. Guys, if you think that The Mandalorian and Grogu is going to leg out like The Force Awakens, I might have a bridge to sell you in the desert. Some of the comparisons that it's being made to here, Shang-Chi. Luis Fernando forgot to include our traditional box office comps for post-COVID for The Mandalorian and Grogu. $63 million 5-day opening overseas. He's talking about the international side. Versus Shang-Chi at 56. The Marvels. Flash. The Flash. Black Adam. Black Widow. Thunderbolts. And Eternals. These are the international comps that are being put next to Mando to grade its performance. Do I need to explain how really bad that is? Yikes. Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.